I'm Emma Lawson. I'm 42 years old, divorced, and I've given everything to my career. I don't need constant praise or validation from anyone. But I do expect respect, the kind you earn through 2 decades of hard work, late nights, and results that speak for themselves. That morning in the glass-walled conference room, surrounded by colleagues half my age and my boss Veronica sitting at the head of the table, I realized respect wasn't something they planned to give me. And what I heard next would light a fire I didn't know I still had. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going. The promotion announcement was supposed to be routine. I'd been leading the biggest projects for years, cleaning up messes nobody else could fix, mentoring every new hire who walked through the door. I was the obvious choice. Everyone knew it. Veronica cleared her throat and smiled that practiced corporate smile. We've made our decision for the senior director position. After careful consideration, we're going with someone who brings fresh energy and new perspectives. She paused, looked directly at me, and added, Emma, we love your experience, but let's be honest. You're a little too old for this kind of promotion. This role needs someone who can grow with the company long-term. Laughter. Actual laughter rippled around the table from the younger team members. Like she'd made a joke instead of crushing 20 years of my life into a single dismissive sentence. My face burned. My hands gripped the edge of the table, so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, walked out, and closed the door behind me with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than slamming it would have. In that moment, walking down the hallway with my heart pounding and my vision blurred, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't just survive this. I would win. I sat at my desk and forced myself to breathe slowly. 23 years. That's how long I'd been at this company. I'd started as an assistant, worked my way up through sheer determination, and built a reputation as the person who got things done when nobody else could. I remembered the nights I stayed until midnight fixing client disasters. The weekends I sacrificed to rescue failed projects. The presentations I delivered that saved major accounts. All of it done quietly, professionally, without drama or demanding credit. And now I was too old. Veronica had promoted Kyle instead. 28 years old, confident but inexperienced, someone who talked a great game in meetings but had never actually delivered a complex project start to finish. I pulled up my project files and started reviewing everything I'd accomplished in the past 5 years alone. Revenue increased by 38% on my accounts. Client retention at 94%. 0 failed deliveries. The numbers didn't lie. If Veronica thought age would make me quit, she was wrong. Dead wrong. The undermining started immediately. Veronica began assigning me small, meaningless tasks, updating spreadsheets, organizing files, taking notes in meetings where I used to lead the discussion. She'd smile sweetly and say things like, I'm trying to reduce your workload so you're not overwhelmed. Translation: she wanted me to feel useless. In team meetings, she'd cut me off mid-sentence to ask Kyle's opinion instead. She'd praise his ideas I'd actually suggested weeks earlier that she'd ignored. I watched her tactics carefully. Every dismissive comment. Every project she redirected away from me. Every time she positioned Kyle as the future and me as the past. But I didn't react. I didn't complain to HR or confront her publicly. Instead, I paid attention. I documented everything. I learned her patterns, her blind spots, her overconfidence. My advantage wasn't going to be confrontation. It was going to be knowledge, timing, and strategy. I just had to be patient. 3 weeks after the promotion announcement, I caught my first break. Veronica had rushed through a quarterly report for the executive team, delegating most of it to Kyle. I reviewed it out of habit and found a critical error in the financial projections. The kind of mistake that would embarrass her in front of the CEO. I had 2 choices. Let it go through and watch her fail, or fix it quietly. I chose the middle path. I corrected the error, submitted the revised version directly to finance with a subtle note, found a discrepancy in the Q3 numbers. Adjusted for accuracy. The executive team praised the thoroughness of the report. Veronica got the credit publicly, but finance knew who'd actually caught it. Later that day, Veronica cornered me by the coffee machine. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for catching that," she said tightly. "Just doing my job," I replied, matching her fake politeness. She walked away, and I could feel her glare burning into my back. Let her underestimate me. That's exactly how I'd win. I started building alliances carefully. There was Jake in HR, sharp, observant, overlooked because he was quiet. I'd mentored him 2 years ago when he first joined the company. Now I made a point of having coffee with him, sharing insights about company politics without being obvious about it. "You see things others don't," I told him one afternoon. "That's valuable." He smiled, surprised. "Thanks, Emma. Not many people notice." "I notice," I said simply. Within weeks, Jake started feeding me information. Upcoming policy changes, executive concerns, restructuring rumors. Nothing confidential, just context that helped me see the bigger picture. I also reconnected with old colleagues in other departments. People I'd helped over the years who remembered my work ethic and integrity. Slowly, quietly, I was building a network Veronica didn't even know existed. Because here's what she didn't understand. Respect isn't given by a job title. It's earned through relationships, results, and reliability. And I've been earning it for 2 decades. Carl struggled. It wasn't surprising. He'd been promoted based on potential, not proven ability. And now he was drowning. I watched him fumble a major client presentation, promising deliverables he couldn't possibly meet. I saw him panic when a project timeline collapsed because he hadn't built in contingency plans. Veronica covered for him constantly, making excuses, reassigning his work, blaming external factors. But the executive team was starting to notice. Meanwhile, I kept my head down and executed flawlessly on every small task Veronica gave me. I finished early. I exceeded expectations. I made everything look effortless. One afternoon, the CFO stopped by my desk. "Emma, I heard you saved the Q3 report," he said quietly. "Good catch." "Thank you," I replied, not making a big deal of it. "We need more of that attention to detail around here," he added, giving me a meaningful look before walking away. I didn't smile until he was gone. Momentum was building. Slowly, but unmistakably. I started observing Veronica the way a chess player studies an opponent. She was predictable. She prioritized visibility over substance. She made decisions based on optics, not outcomes. She surrounded herself with people who agreed with her instead of people who challenged her thinking. Every pattern I identified became a potential advantage. I noticed she always scheduled important meetings right before lunch when people were distracted and less likely to ask hard questions. I noticed she took credit for team wins but blamed individuals for losses. I noticed she never actually read detailed reports, just skimmed summaries. These weren't just observations. They were weapons I could use when the time was right. But timing was everything. So I waited, watched, and prepared. One evening, I overheard her on a call with a client, promising features our product couldn't deliver. I quietly documented the conversation, noting the date, time, and impossible commitments she'd made. She had no idea I was building a case, piece by piece, with nothing but facts and her own words. My first real victory came unexpectedly. A side project I'd been working on, a process improvement initiative Veronica had dismissed as low priority, went live and immediately showed results. Client response times dropped by 40%. Efficiency increased across 3 departments. The metrics were undeniable. The executive team loved it. They asked who led the initiative. Veronica tried to claim ownership in the meeting, saying it was part of her strategic vision for operational excellence. But I documented everything. Emails, project plans, implementation notes, all with my name on them, timestamped months before she'd even acknowledged the project existed. The CFO looked at me across the conference table. "Emma, this was your design, correct?" "Yes," I said simply. "I'm glad it's working." Veronica's jaw tightened. After the meeting, she pulled me aside. "Next time, check with me before launching something company-wide." "I did check," I replied calmly. "You said it was low priority." "I prioritized it anyway." I walked away before she could respond. For the first time in months, I felt something close to satisfaction. The undermining continued, but now it was sloppier. During a client lunch, I overheard Veronica telling one of our biggest accounts that I was coasting toward retirement, and that Kyle was the real talent driving innovation. My first instinct was rage, but I swallowed it, smiled politely, and said nothing. Instead, I pulled out my phone and made a quick note. March 14th, client lunch, disparaging comments about employee performance to external partner. I was building a file. Not for revenge, for protection. Because if Veronica ever tried to push me out formally, I'd have documentation showing a pattern of age discrimination and professional sabotage. I wasn't going to fight dirty. I was going to fight smart. That evening, I sent Jake a casual message. Coffee tomorrow? Want to hear your thoughts on something? He replied immediately, absolutely. My network was growing. And Veronica had no idea. An unexpected mentor appeared. Brenda Hastings, a retired executive who left the company 5 years ago, reached out after hearing about my process improvement project through industry contacts. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. I've been watching your career from a distance, she said, stirring her latte. You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Brilliant work, constantly overlooked. Thank you, I said, unsure where this was going. There's a policy loophole you should know about, Brenda continued, lowering her voice. The company has a provision for employees to propose special projects directly to the board if they can demonstrate strategic value. It bypasses middle management entirely. My heart skipped. I didn't know that existed. Most people don't. But you could use it. She slid a folder across the table. I took the liberty of outlining how. I opened it. Inside was a complete framework. Proposal templates, approval processes, precedent cases. Why are you helping me? I asked. Brenda smiled. Because watching talented people get pushed aside for being too experienced makes me furious. And because I think you're going to do something extraordinary. I left that cafe with a roadmap and renewed purpose. 2 weeks later, I got my first test. A critical client, our second largest account, threatened to leave after Kyle botched a product demo. He'd overpromised features, underprepared, and essentially destroyed 6 months of relationship building. Veronica panicked. She couldn't fix it. Kyle couldn't fix it. The account was hours from walking. The CFO called me directly. Emma, I know this isn't officially your project anymore, but can you salvage this? I had every right to say no, to let them drown in the mess they'd created. Instead, I said, give me 2 hours. I called the client, acknowledged the mistakes honestly, and presented a realistic solution with a timeline we could actually meet. I didn't make excuses. I didn't oversell. I just told the truth and offered a path forward. The client stayed. The CFO sent me a personal thank you email. Copied the CEO. Veronica said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. I'd just proven I was indispensable, and everyone knew it. Veronica's mistakes were piling up. She'd pushed through a strategy that required resources we didn't have. She'd approved budgets that didn't make mathematical sense. She'd made promises to executives she couldn't keep. And Kyle, her golden boy, was crumbling under pressure he wasn't ready for. During one particularly disastrous presentation, Kyle stumbled through slides he clearly didn't understand. Veronica tried to jump in and save him, but she only made it worse. I sat quietly at the back of the room, taking notes. Afterwards, the CEO stopped me in the hallway. Emma, you've been here a long time. What's your read on the current strategy? It was a trap, potentially. If I criticized Veronica, I'd look petty. If I endorsed her failing plan, I'd look incompetent. So I chose the third option. I told the data-driven truth. The strategy has merit, I said carefully, but the execution timeline is unrealistic given our current resources. We'd need to either extend deadlines or allocate additional budget. He nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Thank you for the honesty. He walked away, and I knew I'd just positioned myself as the reasonable, experienced voice in the room. I started compiling my portfolio. Every project I'd led. Every success metric. Every client testimonial. Every problem I'd solved that nobody else could. I organized it chronologically, with clear evidence and third-party validation for each achievement. It wasn't arrogance. It was insurance. Because Veronica's next move, I suspected, would be to try to push me out entirely. And when she did, I'd need proof of my value that was impossible to deny. I also documented every instance of her undermining me. Emails where she dismissed my ideas, then later claimed them as her own. Meetings where she redirected my projects. Comments about my age in front of colleagues. I wasn't building a weapon. I was building a shield. If this ever went to HR or legal, I'd be ready. But I hoped it wouldn't come to that. I hoped confidence would win without needing warfare. Still, hope wasn't a strategy. Preparation was. An opportunity appeared from an unexpected direction. The company's West Coast division was launching a major digital transformation initiative. They needed someone to lead it, someone with deep experience, client relationships, and proven execution. The division head, Marcus Chen. Marcus Brennan reached out to me directly. Emma, I've heard great things about your work. Would you be interested in leading our digital transformation project? It's high visibility, reports directly to executive leadership. I kept my voice steady. I'd be very interested. Good. I'll make it formal by end of week. It was perfect. A high-profile project that Veronica couldn't block because it came from another division. A chance to prove myself on a bigger stage. When Veronica found out, she tried to intervene, claiming I was essential to current operations. But Marcus outranked her, and the CEO approved the assignment. For the first time in months, I saw genuine panic in Veronica's eyes. She was losing control, and she knew it. The digital transformation project became my showcase. I assembled a team, built a realistic timeline, and executed with precision. Every milestone hit on schedule. Every deliverable exceeded expectations. The West Coast division loved working with me. They appreciated my honesty, my experience, my ability to anticipate problems before they became disasters. Meanwhile, back in my old department, things were falling apart. Kyle had missed another major deadline. 2 clients had downgraded their contracts. Team morale was tanking. Veronica tried desperately to regain control, but she was fighting fires everywhere and losing ground daily. I stayed focused on my project, letting my results speak for themselves. One afternoon, the CEO joined our team meeting virtually. Emma, this is exactly the kind of execution we need across the company, he said. Excellent work. Thank you, I replied simply. After he logged off, my team looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months: respect. Not because of my age or my title, but because I'd earned it through competence and consistency. Momentum was unmistakably on my side now. Just when everything seemed to be going perfectly, Veronica struck back. She assigned me an impossible deadline on a complex compliance audit while I was still leading the transformation project. It was clearly designed to make me fail, to prove I was overwhelmed and past my prime. I had 3 days to complete something that normally took 2 weeks. My first instinct was to push back, to call out the obvious sabotage. Instead, I did something unexpected. I delegated brilliantly. I'd been mentoring people for years. Now I called in those relationships. Jake helped with data gathering. A colleague in legal expedited reviews. My transformation team shifted priorities to help where they could. 72 hours later, I submitted the complete audit. Thorough. Accurate. Flawless. Veronica's face when she received it was worth every sleepless night. The executive team was impressed. Again. And Veronica had just used her last credible attack. Every attempt to trip me up had only demonstrated my competence, my network, and my ability to handle pressure she couldn't dream of managing. My allies started speaking up. Jake filed a subtle report with HR about concerns regarding age-based comments in team meetings. He didn't name me specifically, but the dates matched perfectly with Veronica's public comments. Several colleagues began advocating for me in their own circles, mentioning my reliability and expertise. The West Coast Division formally requested I stay on for Phase 2 of the transformation project. I wasn't campaigning for anything. I was just doing excellent work, and people were noticing. Meanwhile, Veronica's credibility was eroding fast. She'd made too many promises she couldn't keep. She'd promoted someone who wasn't ready. She'd alienated experienced staff and created a culture of favoritism that was finally being questioned. During a leadership meeting I wasn't invited to, I later heard the CEO asked pointedly, "Why are we losing institutional knowledge? Why are our most experienced people being sidelined?" Nobody said my name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. The tide was turning, and Veronica could feel it. The confrontation came during a board presentation. Veronica had prepared a strategy deck that looked impressive on slides, but fell apart under scrutiny. When the board started asking detailed questions, she floundered. Then she made a critical mistake. "Emma would know the historical context better than I do," she said, trying to deflect. "But I'm not sure her approach is what we need moving forward." It was a trap. Agree with her and I look obsolete. Disagree and I look combative. So I did neither. "The data suggests a hybrid approach," I said calmly, pulling up actual metrics on my tablet. "We can leverage historical lessons while adapting to current market conditions. Here's what that looks like in practice." I walked them through a clear, data-driven analysis. No ego. No attacks. Just facts and practical solutions. The board nodded, asked follow-up questions, and ultimately approved my approach over Veronica's. After the meeting, she was furious. But she couldn't say anything because I'd simply presented better information. The CEO caught my eye as we left the room. He didn't say anything, but his slight nod told me everything. Veronica started taking desperate risks. She approved an expensive vendor contract without proper vetting. She committed to client deliverables that required technology we hadn't built yet. She reorganized her team in ways that created more confusion than clarity. Every decision was designed to show she was bold and innovative. Instead, she just looked reckless. Meanwhile, I stayed focused. I guided my projects quietly but effectively. I solved problems before they escalated. I built trust through consistency. One of my team members said it best during a casual conversation. "Emma doesn't make a lot of noise, but she gets everything done." That's leadership. I didn't respond, just smiled. Because that was exactly the reputation I'd been building for 23 years. And now, finally, it was paying off. A major client nearly walked because of Kyle's continued mismanagement. Veronica tried to handle it herself. She failed spectacularly, making promises she couldn't keep and fundamentally misunderstanding the client's concerns. The CEO called me personally. "Emma, I need you to fix this. Whatever it takes." I met with the client that afternoon. I listened. I acknowledged where we'd failed. I presented a realistic recovery plan with clear accountability. The client stayed, but with one condition: we only work with Emma's team from now on. When that message reached the executive team, something shifted. They'd been watching Veronica struggle for months. They'd seen Kyle fail repeatedly. And they'd watched me consistently deliver results, no matter what obstacles were thrown at me. The CEO called a private meeting with me. "Emma, we need to talk about your future here." My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm listening. The board is considering a restructuring, and your name keeps coming up for a much bigger role." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just said, "I'm ready for that conversation." The announcement came 3 weeks later. Major organizational restructuring. New divisions. New leadership structure. And I was named Senior Vice President of Operations, overseeing multiple departments, including my old one. Veronica would now report to me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't gloat. I didn't make any dramatic statements. I simply accepted the role professionally and started doing the job. My first meeting with Veronica was brief and businesslike. "I expect the same standards from everyone on the team," I said calmly. "Clear communication, realistic timelines, and accountability for results. No favorites. No exceptions." She nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact. I could see it in her face. The realization that her underestimation of me, her dismissiveness about my age and experience, had been her downfall. But I felt no joy in her discomfort. Just satisfaction that fairness and competence had finally won. I spent my first months making changes. I promoted based on merit, not favoritism. I implemented transparent project tracking. I created mentorship programs for younger employees while respecting the expertise of experienced staff. The culture started shifting. People felt heard, valued, accountable. Kyle, to his credit, approached me privately. I wasn't ready for that promotion, he admitted. I'm sorry I took a role you deserved. You didn't take it, I said. It was given to you. That's not your fault. Still, I've learned a lot from watching how you lead. No drama. Just results. That's the only way I know how, I replied. We shook hands. And I meant it when I said, you have potential. Let me help you develop it properly. Because this was never about revenge or punishing people who'd wronged me. It was about building something better. Veronica tried one last play. She attempted to undermine a project I was leading by raising concerns about budget allocation in a board meeting. But I'd anticipated it. I had detailed financial projections, risk assessments, and third-party validation ready. I presented them calmly, thoroughly, professionally. The board approved my proposal unanimously. Afterward, Veronica finally seemed to understand. Her tactics didn't work anymore because I'd built something she never could, credibility earned through decades of consistent excellence. She requested a transfer to another division 2 weeks later. I approved it without hesitation. She wasn't a bad person. She was just someone who'd confused confidence with competence and paid the price. I wished her well and meant it. The company transformed under new leadership. Employee satisfaction scores rose. Client retention improved. Revenue growth accelerated. And I built a culture where age and experience were valued, where quiet competence mattered as much as charisma, where results spoke louder than office politics. One afternoon, a young employee approached me nervously. I'm afraid I'm not moving up fast enough, she said. I smiled. Focus on becoming excellent at what you do. The recognition will follow. Not always on your timeline, but it will follow. That's what happened with you, isn't it? Eventually, yes. And it was worth the wait. She thanked me and left. I sat at my desk, looking out at the city skyline, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not because I'd beaten Veronica. Because I'd proven something more important. Competence endures. Excellence wins. And patience combined with preparation is unstoppable. 2 years after that humiliating conference room moment, I stood in front of the entire company at our annual meeting. As Senior Vice President, I was presenting our strategic vision for the next 5 years. The room was silent, attentive, respectful. I looked out at the faces, young and old, new hires and veterans, and I remembered Veronica's words. You're a little too old for this promotion. Too old. The phrase that was meant to diminish me had become my fuel. I'd proven that experience isn't a liability. It's a superpower. That quiet confidence beats loud arrogance every time. That age brings perspective, patience, and wisdom that no amount of enthusiasm can replace. I finished my presentation to genuine applause. The CEO approached me afterward. Emma, that was exceptional. Thank you for staying with us through everything. Thank you for recognizing what I could contribute, I replied. But the truth was simpler than that. I didn't need their recognition to know my worth. I'd always known it. I just needed the chance to prove it. And when that chance finally came, now I make the decisions they thought I couldn't. And I make them better than they ever imagined.